Good evening. This is Wednesday, December 17th, 34 days until the inauguration of President-elect Barack Obama. Forget President Bush's self-chosen would-be legacy of keeping America safe after the 9/11 attacks, though tragically not during them. His actual legacy, the one with staying power, might just be in how people the world over are now protesting abuses of power. Our fifth story on the countdown, this shoe is for you. Flying footwear, suddenly and almost officially the new political equivalent of flipping the bird. Shoe tossing as means of protest, suddenly no longer contained to the Arab world or merely against the American president. An angry New York City firefighter in the Bronx attempting to hurl his shoe at a fire captain to protest the closing of a small City Island firehouse during evening and overnight hours. And this morning, one subway ride to the south in Manhattan, a frustrated subway rider named Stephen Millies looking to aim his displeasure over massive fare hikes at the head, the literal and figurative head of the New York transit system, Elliott Saunders.
We need a rollback in the fare, a moratorium in the interest rate, and one more thing. Where is Elliott Sanders? You made $300,000 last year, and this shoe is for you.
That gesture, an apparent homage to Muntadar al-Zaidi, the Iraqi journalist, you will no doubt recall, who threw both of his shoes at President Bush at that news conference in Baghdad. Mr. Zaidi still in custody, facing criminal proceedings. Mr. Millies issued a summons for disorderly conduct and released. Protesters outside the White House today demonstrating for Mr. Zaidi's release, lining up more than 100 pair of shoes tagged with the names of Iraqi civilians who have been killed as a result of the war, before throwing them at a fellow protester wearing a giant Bush head and a prison uniform. The demonstrators also delivering a letter to the Iraqi embassy calling for Mr. Zaidi's release. At the Iraqi parliament, the speaker threatening to resign after lawmakers there arguing over whether the shoe-throwing journalist should be freed from jail immediately. For a third straight day, the people of Iraq protesting his detainment. At a summit of 33 Latin American leaders, the Brazilian president joking to reporters there at the start of a news conference, please, nobody take off your shoes. Warning the media also, in this heat, if anybody takes off their shoes, we'll know right away because of the smell. And even over at The View, when Elizabeth Hasselbeck talked about the bone she had to pick with the White House over not being originally invited to one of its many Christmas parties, she was careful to begin by saying she would be keeping her heels on. Joy Behar, however, more than happy to go barefoot.
I am a little miffed because, not that I had time to go to that party anyway.
Damn party.
I have my own cookies and chocolate to
You know something, Elizabeth? If he were here, this is what I would do.
In a moment to the U.S. War College and Mr. Bush's latest effort to make his legacy not that of being the modern-day equivalent of whoever the first politician was to whom somebody gave the finger, but of being the man who kept us safe after first utterly failing to keep us safe. But before that, our own Eugene Robinson, also, of course, columnist and associate editor at the Washington Post. Gene, good evening.
Evening, Keith.
And there's no business like shoe business. Are we at a tipping point here where the shoe could actually be the new form of political protest?
I guess I kind of hope not. It's kind of dangerous to be hurling footwear at public officials all the time. This is a moment, I think. Clearly, what Mr. al-Zaidi did in Baghdad captured the imagination of the world, and it was because it was that moment. It was George Bush, and we now understand the meaning of the insult. I'm not sure that it has staying power going forward. One notices at that transit meeting how quickly that gentleman got hustled out of the way. So maybe security forces will be a bit more on guard for this sort of thing.
The president having repeatedly attempted to downplay that incident in Baghdad, he said it was Mr. Zaidi's attempt to get on television, which is kind of odd considering Mr. Zaidi is a television reporter. But does it become harder to downplay something once it has proven to have gotten this sort of global cultural relevance, and not just widespread, not everywhere from Brazil to the Bronx, but kind of organically, too? I don't think people set out to create this.
No, and look, this is going to be one of the iconic images from the Bush years, from George W. Bush's presidency. The President of the United States ducking two shoes. And there's no way in the world to downplay that. It's been played about 10 zillion times since it happened on all the world's television sets. I think one reason it's so fascinating is the built-in ambivalence of the image, of what you see. I mean, on the one hand, we don't want people throwing shoes at the head of the President of the United States, just as a general thing. That's a bad thing. On the other hand, this is George W. Bush. He was in Iraq. He is deeply unpopular because of Iraq. And so I think a lot of people are pulled in those two directions. It's a bad thing to have happened, but it was George Bush in Iraq, and overlying that is just the fact that it's just so weird. So it's utterly captivating, and I think we'll always remember it.
But in addition to these cultural and political implications, I mean, just on the street in Baghdad today, there's chaos over this. Not that there was not before, but specifically relating to a man throwing two shoes. I mean, does it seem that in terms of the situation in Iraq that keeping the shoe thrower in custody will come at great expense to the stability of the Iraqi government? I mean, we're talking about a pair of shoes with incredible implications.
This looks like a real problem for the Iraqi government. They're going to have to first, at some point, own up to whatever sort of treatment or mistreatment the shoe thrower, Mr. al-Zaidi, got after being taken into custody. And then what are you going to do? Are they going to put him on trial? Are they going to try to jail him for some long period of time, as apparently the Prime Minister would like? I think that would be a problem, since he is such a folk hero on the streets of Baghdad. They're going to have to find some way to make a big show of meting out justice, and then perhaps quietly give him clemency.
And some defense attorney is going to be saying if the shoe doesn't fit, Eugene Robinson.
Exactly. You must acquit.
NBC,
yes.
Washington
You're going to be at the Venetian Room for how long, Keith?
Quite a while, it sounds like. Thanks, Gene.